What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT, man. College football playoff reactions, bro. The college football semifinal games were absolutely madness. I mean, it was wild. You had Texas, who almost completed one of the biggest choke jobs in college football history. Thank God they didn't fall through with it. Alabama lost to Michigan. Like, how the hell are you a Nick Saban coach team in the toughest conference in college football and you don't have a center that knows how to snap the ball properly? We're going to get into my reactions to all of the college football playoff stuff. Also got my national championship prediction. I couldn't wait a couple of days. I'm finna give it to you guys tonight. I got my week 18 NFL predictions to the two biggest games of the week. Colts, Texans. AFC East championship between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. And there are a few other things that we're going to hit on tonight. What went wrong in the Panthers trade for Bryce Young and the problem that college football has with bowl games. Before we begin, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that every episode of the podcast that's available on the channel is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoy, we would greatly appreciate it if you give us a 5-star review. Also, share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances if you enjoy this episode. And let's get into it, man. So, Michigan took down Alabama in the Rose Bowl. And at one point, I thought Alabama had this thing won. They were up 2013 late in the fourth quarter. All of a sudden, J.J. McCarthy leads Michigan downfield, and they tied the game, and it goes into overtime. And this was a really non-Alabama-like game because Nick Saban got out-coached by Jim Harbaugh. There's no way you can play in the toughest conference in all of college football, win the SEC title game, and still not have a center that knows how to properly snap the damn football, bro. There were so many bad snaps in this game that I lost count at 5. And it was a major reason why Bama lost. Another reason why Alabama lost is that their offensive line played like dog shit, man. And I don't get why Alabama didn't decide to run the football a lot more. Like, they came out in this game trying to throw the ball, and it made no sense to me because that's not the strength of your team. At best, Jalen Milroe should have only had to throw the football 18 times in this game. Their offensive line gave up 6 sacks, man. Like, anytime they asked him to drop back to throw, he was getting thrown on the ground, man. Michigan was sending pressure, getting home. And when they were even rushing 4, they were still getting home on Alabama's offensive line. And this offensive line has been an issue for the Crimson Tide for the last 3 to 4 years. When is Nick Saban going to get this shit corrected? You can't expect to win another national title until your offensive line is able to play at an elite level. We saw what Washington did against Texas. They gave up 0 sacks against one of the better pass rushes in America. And another thing that really irritated me with Alabama in this game is that their last play in overtime was really idiotic. Like, everybody knew Jalen Milroe was going to get the football. So why would you run it up the middle with him? Wouldn't it have made more sense to try to get him outside? You know, maybe try to call a quarterback counter to get him out to the edge. Because if Michigan was killing you all game with their defensive line obliterating your O-line up front, why are you going to think that nobody's going to expect you to run a QB power up the middle with him and that it was going to work? Like, that play call from Tommy Rees was absolutely ridiculous. And you got to give a lot of credit to Michigan because barely anybody at all picked Michigan to win this game. Majority of bettors had their money on Michigan losing, and the majority of bettors also took Alabama with the under. This is something that many Big Ten fans have been hoping would happen for a very long time. And it finally happened. Jim Harbaugh finally broke through, and they finally dethroned the SEC. And this is the first time in damn near a decade that we're going to have a national championship without the SEC. And I'm all for it. Michigan outplayed Alabama. Where I was really wrong at was when I said that this game was going to be evenly matched from a talent standpoint. And it obviously wasn't. from the get-go, Michigan was the better team. And if it wasn't for that mishap that they had early in the first quarter with that fumbled punt, I strongly doubt Alabama would have even been able to get the 20 points in this game, because Michigan's defense, they had a fantastic afternoon against Alabama's offense. And Alabama, they were a one-dimensional team. Michigan, they had success running the football, although they didn't have the kind of game that they've had in the past. When it comes to their efficiency running the ball, they were really good at it when they needed to be. Blake Corum, he was the unsung hero of this game. Everybody singing their praises to J.J. McCarthy, but you got to give a lot of props to how Blake Corum played. He made some big plays. He had a couple of big catches. He had that big 17-yard run, which pretty much iced the game in OT. You see, whoever was going to be the winner of this game, it was going to come down to who could play a more complementary style of football. And Michigan was able to do that. They had success throwing the football with J.J. McCarthy. He didn't have the greatest game, in my opinion, but he was good enough to get them the win. He was getting outside the pocket, extending plays. He had a couple of big ones as well. He had like a 16-yard run late, which helped them drive the football downfield. Alabama, their passing attack was abysmal. And after watching this game, I'm starting to wonder if Alabama is even going to have Jalen Milroe starting next season. Yes, the dude made a lot of improvement throughout the course of this year, but is he good enough to lead you to another SEC title with how tough this conference is going to be in 2024 with Oklahoma and Texas arriving on the scene? If you can even be able to get to 200 yards passing in today's age of college football, that's a problem. Jalen Milroe is a really good athlete. He had some electric runs, but he didn't have too many electric throws. He didn't have a lot of big throws downfield that we've seen him make the majority of this season. The offensive line didn't do him no favors. I mean, when you're getting sacked as soon as you get the football, that's a problem. Of course, you're not going to have a lot of success throwing that thing, but there were moments when he did have some protection and he couldn't deliver in the passing game for Alabama. Look, Nick Saban, around this time last year, said that he wanted to go back to the basics. He wanted to go back to playing physical defense and having a physical offense that isn't just overly relying on the passing game. But in 2024, if you can't have a quarterback that can make the necessary throws when needed, how are you going to ever be able to win another national title? It's a passing game. Michigan, we know what they like to do. They like to run the football. That's their bread and butter. But they didn't have to overly rely on it for a win in this game. Meanwhile, for Alabama, the only time they had success offensively was when they were able to run the football. Michigan, if it wasn't for the special teams mishaps that they had, they probably would have won this game way more convincingly than what they did. And you got to give a lot of credit to the offensive coaching staff of Michigan. Some of the plays and schemes that they were running were confusing Alabama's defense. There was a moment early in the first half when Alabama, their defense went to the sideline and Nick Saban was coaching them up, telling them, hey, man, like, you got to communicate. You got to be able to keep up with the motions. There were a lot of things that Michigan was doing offensively from a schematic standpoint that gave Alabama's defense a lot of problems. You know, for this to be a Nick Saban coach team, they didn't really look all that well coached in this game, and yet they still had a chance to win it. And if Alabama would have won this thing, I would have said that this is the worst national championship Alabama team that Saban has ever had throughout this era. And he has done a fantastic job coaching this team up to this point. If any other coach was coaching Alabama football this year, I don't even think they would have won 10 games. And yeah, we know Alabama recruits at a really high level every single season, but Michigan, they were the better team on both sides of the football, minus special teams. Special teams is what killed them in this game. And you know, I would have thought that Alabama would have done the complete opposite. I was thinking that Alabama was going to come into this game, their defense was going to be able to shut down Michigan's rushing attack, and that they were going to be able to put Michigan in a situation where they would have to overly rely on J.J. McCarthy to lead them to the win. And that never happened. There was never a single point in this game when Michigan wasn't able to do what they've been doing all season long. They still been able to do what got them here. And meanwhile, for Alabama, this was a team that outside of the run game, they had no identity on offense. Bama's identity all season long up to this game has been, getting some big plays in the passing game here and there with Jalen Milroe, with how well he throws the deep ball, relying on his athleticism in the run game, and also your other running backs, and only throwing the football when need be. But in this game, Michigan really put Alabama against the wall because the rushing attack, if that thing wasn't working and they had to put it in the air, they had no success at all. You can say the offensive line was the main reason for that, but we got to put a lot of the blame on Jalen Milroe. Nick Saban, if I'm him, I'm hitting the transfer portal ASAP, and I'm getting another quarterback up in there to give Jalen Milroe some competition. Or hopefully one of the younger quarterbacks that they have coming up from their prior recruiting classes are good enough to push him for the starting job. I don't know if him at quarterback is a sustainable formula for Bama to have success in 2024. I mean, this dude was terrible in this game, and he wasn't even all that great in the SEC championship. But J.J. McCarthy, he was miles better than what Jalen Milroe was in this game. Michigan had the big quarterback advantage. And when you have a quarterback advantage, that's normally key to you being able to pull off the win. There were times when J.J. McCarthy made some big throws with the pocket collapsing that really impressed me. Michigan, for them to get this win was really impressive to me because I don't think too many people expected them to pull off this victory against Nick Saban. Jim Harbaugh, he's come up short in the past. This is his first time actually making it to a national title. And with how good of a coach he is, you would have thought that he's been to more national championships. This is somebody who made it to a Super Bowl, took the 49ers to 3 straight NFC championship games. He turned around Stanford football, made them somewhat of a powerhouse in a sense before he departed. And then he goes back to Michigan, and he finally is able to break through with everything that this program had going on this season, with the whole sign stealing scandal. And rather you care about it or not, this team took what could have been a distraction and used it as motivation to continue to find ways to win games. Michigan versus everybody, I didn't really care about the whole motivation tactic that they used because you got caught cheating. But I got to give them props for being able to rally behind that situation, not having Jim Harbaugh on the sideline and still being able to beat your rival in the biggest game of the season is a testament to what this Michigan team is. They're not a flashy team like Washington that's going to impress you with a lot of amazing plays in the passing game or a lot of explosive runs. But they know what they are. And what they are a hard-nosed football team that's physical. And when you go up against Michigan, not only are you about to suit up for a 60-minute football game, but you're about to go to war. I mean, these dudes are tough. And Jim Harbaugh, before the game started, he said that this game was going to come down to the trenches. And it ultimately did. And Michigan won it by a landslide. The fact that Bama even was able to keep this thing close, even had a chance at winning this thing, was amazing because that offensive line was dog water, bro. Like, Nick Saban has to get that offensive line fixed. Michigan, without one of their best offensive tackles, who was an All-American, by the way, did a pretty good job at keeping J.J. McCarthy upright. You want to know why? Because they were able to be balanced. Alabama's defense didn't really know what was coming. Michigan, on the other end, you knew what Alabama was going to do. They were either going to run the football with Jalen Milroe or they were going to hand that thing on. And if they did anything else, you knew you were going to be able to stop it. Really disappointing to see Alabama get clobbered the way that they did. And the score says 27-20, but I truthfully believe that Michigan was the more dominant team from the jump. Like, once I saw the third offensive possession out of Alabama in this game, I knew Michigan was going to win. No way you can win this game giving up 6 sacks. Like, that's crazy. Michigan, I've slept on this team all season long. I doubted them against Penn State. They beat Penn State running the football 31 straight times. I doubted them against Ohio State. They proved me wrong in that game. And then I picked against them in this game against Alabama, and they proved me wrong again. They were the better team. I was wrong about that. What people were saying were actually true. Michigan doesn't rival Alabama in talent because of recruiting. But they rival Alabama in talent, and they were the better team in this game because of player development, A lot of these guys that Michigan has on their roster have been with this program for 3, going on 4 years. They got a lot of veterans on that team, and it was evident. Because no matter how big the moment got for Michigan, they never got rattled. Meanwhile, for Alabama in overtime, I mean, they just completely imploded on themselves, man. Like, that was an abysmal play call out of Nick Saban and Tommy Rees, bro. Like, I'm really disappointed in Nick Saban for that, for even allowing that to take place, and he even owned up to it after the game. He took responsibility for it. You expect more out of Nick Saban, but, you know, you got to give a lot of props to Michigan for this win, man. Like, I'm not taking anything away from Michigan. This was a well-earned win. It could have even been a more impressive victory if you were able to clean up your special teams mishaps. But, I mean, this was an incredible game. It was a great atmosphere. Somebody said that the Rose Bowl should be the home to the national championship. And I wouldn't be too opposed to that. Like, looking at the Rose Bowl on TV, it really makes me want to go to that shit. Next year, my goal is to save up enough money so I can catch a flight and make it to a Rose Bowl game. Rather it be a semifinal game, a national title game, or just a regular bowl game. I know people think that bowl games are still meaningless, but the Rose Bowl is peak college football. Because you know what college football is about? It's about tradition. It's about pageantry. And the Rose Bowl has an incredible atmosphere that embodies everything that what makes college football so great. And this was a great game, and it had an epic ending, man. Went to overtime. You got the 17-yard run by Blake Corum. He was running guys over. He was mauling guys to the ground. He didn't have 100 yards rushing, but he made some big catches. I mean, Blake Corum was somebody who I don't think got enough credit for how well he played in that game. And he's another Michigan player that has spent a lot of time with this program. He's a veteran. He's a leader in the locker room. And it seems like everybody on this Michigan team is a leader in their own right. But kudos to Jim Harbaugh for having this Michigan team ready to play for the first time. You know what they say, third time's a charm. And his third time in the playoffs, he finally found the way to get through. And I thought when they were down 2013, it was over for them. He was about to drop to 0-3. And we don't know about Jim Harbaugh's future. I want to see him back in the NFL. But if he stays at Michigan, this is still going to be one of the best run programs in college football, even with the sanctions. Like, people think that Michigan after this year isn't going to be able to shake back with the ramifications that they're going to have to deal with because of their sign stealing scandal. But with what they did this season, you know, having to overcome all that and having to tune out the noise, I'm not going to count out this program again. I expect them to be right back in the swing of things, especially with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams. And Ryan Day, I don't think this dude is going to have what it takes to end the streak against Michigan. Michigan is just way more tougher and way more physical than Ohio State and Penn State and the other teams in the Pac-12. Even when Washington and Oregon and USC arrived on the scene, you still have to be able to maintain a certain style of play if you want to have success in the Big Ten Conference. And what we saw Michigan do against Alabama, just bullying them and torturing them up front with their defensive line, their offensive line, that's something that we don't really see happen to Alabama very often. Normally, Alabama is on the opposing end. They're the ones playing bully ball. They're the ones who are imposing their will up front. But the Big Ten, this was a major victory for them. They proved to everybody that the SEC isn't the only conference that just runs college football. The Big Ten hasn't had a lot of success in this past year's bowl season against the SEC, but this was a major win for them because it showed you that you don't need to have great recruiting classes to be able to win. All you got to be able to do is recruit guys that fit what your culture is, what you want to build, and what you want the identity of your football team to be. And I don't think there's not a single team in college football that plays true to themselves than what Michigan does. And they perfectly embody the personality and identity of Jim Harbaugh. What is Jim Harbaugh? This dude is, you know, he's gritty, he's tough, he's a little bit, you know, weird at times. But I like Jim Harbaugh. And this Michigan team, they rally behind their head coach, and they've used this as motivation to get them to the national championship. And there's been so many times when Michigan this season has been down and out. It looks like they were going to be done, and they found ways to seek out wins. And this was another example of that. This is a tough-ass team, man. And even if you don't like Michigan and you don't agree with what they did when it comes to the whole cheating scandal or stealing signs, you still got to give your hats off to them and show respect for what they put on display in this game against Alabama. Because normally when you're down and out against Alabama, they smell blood in the water and you're not able to find a way to get a victory. Michigan, they were able to slay the giant that is Nick Saban in Alabama football in the college football semifinals. And this is only Nick Saban's second loss in the first round of the playoffs. He doesn't lose in the first round like that. There are people saying, oh, you got to watch out if you're Michigan, because you know what happens when you give Nick Saban, oh, good old Nicholas Saban, a month to prepare. Well, Nick Saban had a month to prepare, and he didn't have a center that knew how to snap the ball properly. There were like 15 bad snaps in this game. And there were so many plays that possibly could have resulted in Jalen Milroe getting his head taken off and him having to lead the game for a damn concussion, bro. Like some of the hits Jalen Milroe was taking in this game, I thought we was watching him get CTE right in front of us. Truthfully, bro, like that offensive line was getting bullied. Like that true freshman left tackle they had, Caden Proctor, he was getting worked. And it wasn't just him. I can't just single him out. Everybody on the offensive line was getting work. Like, when is Alabama going to fix their offensive line problem, bro? This is like the third, fourth straight season this offensive line has sucked. I don't know, man, but this was a great game. Happy that we got blessed with seeing Michigan versus Alabama and not Michigan versus FSU. Like, before we move on, it kind of concerns me that people really thought that Florida State was going to be a better opponent for Michigan than Alabama. For all the people that are trying to say, man, Alabama losing just shows that FSU should have been here. No, the hell it doesn't, bro. Even with you being at full strength, you still would have lost this game. You weren't going to be able to handle the physicality of Michigan. You could barely beat Boston College and Miami. What makes you think that you would have been able to beat Michigan? Like, if you're going to use Alabama almost losing to Auburn in the Iron Bowl, then you got to have that same level of thinking with Florida State, bro. Like, I'm glad that we got Michigan versus Alabama, and it didn't disappoint. This game, what was best for business? Washington almost had one of the biggest choke jobs in the history of the college football playoffs. So, they were up at one point, 34-21. They just get a fumble. And you know what they do with it? They try to go for the kill shot. They tried to put the final nail in the coffin against the Texas Longhorns. And it put them in a really bad situation and a really nerve-wracking situation where they almost costing me some money because I took them to win this thing outright. They tried to get too cute at the end. They tried to do all kinds of halfback passes and shit like that and almost bit them in the ass. And Kalen DeBoer is too good of a coach for something like this to ever happen again. I was really surprised at seeing how Washington nearly choked this game away and gave it to Texas. And Texas in this game, Steve Sarkisian, bro, why did you get away from running the football? Running your running back, CJ Baxter, I believe his name was, at one point was averaging 9.4 yards per carry. And instead of feeding him the rock more, you end up trying to throw the football with Quinn Ewers, and Quinn Ewers had a really awful game. He didn't wake up until midway through the third quarter. He played really well in the fourth quarter, but he looked off in this game. And the main reason why Washington won this thing was because that's the best quarterback on the field at Michael Penix. At one point, Michael Penix was 18-21, and he wasn't missing. And these wide receivers with Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, Roma Dunze, they were giving it to that to that Texas secondary. And the biggest question that most of us had about this game was going to be, how was Texas secondary going to perform against this passing attack of Washington? You had Longhorn fans saying, man, the only reason our secondary looks so bad statistically is because we give up a lot of yards in garbage time when we're up by so much. Well, your secondary got roasted by Michael Penix and the Huskies, bro. Like, Michael Penix, I got a lot of pushback a couple of weeks ago when I said that he should have won the Heisman Trophy. I got nothing against Jalen Daniels, but what Michael Penix did in this game against Texas is something that he's been doing for the majority of this season. He's been the best quarterback in college football in my eyes. You look at somebody who was injured nearly every single season that he played at Indiana. All his seasons ended with season-ending injuries. He enters the transfer portal. He goes to Washington, and he just changes his career trajectory under Kalen DeBoer. And in this game tonight, I saw a Michael Penix that looked like a future top 10 quarterback in the league. He has a great arm. He throws the most accurate deep ball in the country. Not only that, but he was making great plays from within the pocket, stepping up, invading pressure, and he has a good amount of athleticism to, buy time for guys to get open. But with all of the injuries that he has sustained over the last couple of years, he isn't the most mobile guy, but he has enough mobility that you got to account for it. And this was not only one of the best performances that we've ever seen in the college football playoffs, but this is one of the greatest stories in the history of this sport. And that's what I love so much about college football. It's not always about the games and the matchups all the time. I pay attention to player stories. And I don't think it gets any better than the story of Michael Penix, with all the adversity that he had to overcome at Indiana, having season-ending injury after season-ending injury, going to Washington, staying healthy for 2 years, and leading this team to the national title. And how about this defense? This defense, they didn't play great, but they made big plays and big stops when they needed them the most. Especially at the end when the offense damn near gave the game away, bro. Like, I was really disappointed in Washington's coaching staff because they were better than that. They were better than what we saw in the fourth quarter, damn near choking this game away. You should have ran the ball with Dylan Johnson or tried to get the first down. Why are you trying to get shot plays downfield? Like, we get it that you've been killing Texas secondary all afternoon. We understood that, and Texas understood it too. Like, they had a player that got ejected for the first half of this game in their previous game in a Big 12 title game, and he came back in this game, and people thought that he was going to be able to improve the secondary. The secondary didn't get no better. You see, Texas defense is really talented on the front seven. And talent-wise, their secondary isn't even that bad. It's just that it's hard to stop a team that has 3 NFL-caliber wide receivers like what Washington has, and the NFL-caliber quarterback in Michael Penix. In some capacity, you could say that Washington is a diet version of that 2019 LSU team. There were people comparing this Washington team to TCU. I was like, bro, how disrespectful can you be? In no stretch of imagination is Washington anywhere in the same ballpark of what that TCU team was. It's levels to this shit. They are better coached, and they're just way more talented than what TCU was last season. TCU beat Michigan based off Michigan beating themselves and a little bit of luck. Washington, they didn't need luck to beat Texas. They were the better team from the get-go. And from a talent standpoint, Texas looked like they had the advantage. But you see, that's why they say styles make fights. Going into this game, I heard Longhorns fans say, man, our pass rush is about to beat up Washington up front. You do know that Washington won the Joe Moore Award, right? Which gets awarded to the best offensive line in college football. You know how many sacks they gave up? 0. Michael Penix was throwing from clean pockets all night. And even when there was a little bit of pressure in his face, it didn't matter because he was unfazed by it. Sometimes you have quarterbacks that come around that just know how to play their best football when the lights are the brightest. And that's Michael Penix. And not just him, but this whole entire team. This is the same team that almost lost to Stanford and Arizona State, 2 of the worst teams in the Pac-12. Their second half stretch was a little bit wonky. They didn't look like the best team in college football during the second half of the year after they beat Oregon the first time. But you know, one thing that people felt to give Washington credit for is how well they're able to play in crucial moments of the game. And when their defense needed to get a stop to seal this win, they came through despite their coaching staff almost giving it up. At least Kalen DeBoer and the offensive side of the coaching staff, because that was terrible. I'm not going to stop talking about that. I'm still going to be talking about that until Washington proves to me that they win the national title and they win it all. So for the next couple of days, I'm still going to be harping on that, because what the fuck was that decision making? I did not understand why you're trying to get cute when you got the lead and you're up. And Texas got back in this game, and Texas defense, they didn't allow Washington to just go up and down the field on them all night long. They did play better in the fourth quarter. They held them to field goals, and they put this team in position to have an opportunity to win it at the end. And it's a little bit weird how Texas had one last opportunity to steal this game away from the Huskies, because Dylan Johnson got injured with only like 45 seconds left in the game, which stopped the clock and allowed Texas to have enough time to drive down the field. And it came down to one last play. And that one last play, what did the Huskies do? What they've done all season, rise to the occasion. I heard people say, man, this is the same team that almost lost to Washington State. They needed a game-winning field goal to beat Washington State. Oh, well, they barely beat Stanford. They barely beat this team. They barely beat that team. The same Washington team that nearly lost to Oregon State and Arizona State and Stanford and Washington State is the same Washington team that won another one-possession game in the Sugar Bowl against Texas. And while we're on the topic of Texas, Steve Sarkisian, his play call in this game was really questionable. Quinn Ewers, he didn't make things any better with how bad he looked in the first half and midway through the third quarter until he finally came alive. But you got to run the football more, bro. You can't go into the SEC with this pass-heavy approach. You got to be able to put the ball on the ground. And that's tough when you have somebody who has this pass-first philosophy, because we know Steve Sarkisian loves to throw the football. He loves to spread the pigskin out. But when you're in these kinds of games, you got to be able to play complementary style football. You got to be balanced. And with Quinn Ewers looking so bad at one point, the best option for you moving the ball offensively was running the football. If you would have ran the football a lot more in this game, you possibly could have won it. Washington couldn't have stopped the run against you. They gave up 6 yards per carry. Every time you ran the football, it was money. But Washington, defensively up front, they didn't get pushed around like how people thought. And there was a guy named Braylon Trice, who I didn't really know too much about before this game started. I heard of his name, but I never really paid too much attention to him. And I watched a good amount of Washington football this year. This dude was all over the damn field. He had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. This dude was causing havoc on Texas' offensive line. And it's ironic how the way Washington was able to have success against Texas' offensive line is what Longhorn fans thought their defensive line was going to be able to do to Washington. Like I told you guys, that Washington's offensive line, not only are they big and athletic, but they got those Samoans up there. And when you got those Samoans can move. Like, we all get so infatuated with the talent that people have on the interior in the South, but on the West Coast, they got big boys who are pretty physical and really good in their own right. And what's even scarier is that when you have a quarterback that's this locked in, like how Michael Penix was, there's only so much you can do defensively. This dude was in the fucking zone. And when you got a quarterback that's just hot like this, anything that you call just seems to be money. You ever played Madden? And you ever heard something called the money play or one-play touchdown? Well, Washington had a bunch of one-play touchdown play calls on that play call sheet. Texas, defensively, with their pass rush being ineffective, it was a large reason why that secondary got exposed and hung out to dry. When you can't get pressure on a quarterback like Michael Penix, he's going to eat you up. And this dude moves incredibly well in the pocket. Like, his pocket presence is some of the best that I've seen all season long out of any other draft-eligible quarterback. He's like a stronger version of Tua Tagovailoa. He's really good in the quick passing game. He throws a nice deep ball. And then you got Roma Dunze, who is making big plays downfield. Texas, with them not having their front seven playing at the level that they've been able to play all season long, it costed them. There was no way they were going to be able to win this game without being able to get consistent pressure on Michael Penix. Washington, they've been counted out by the majority of America all season long. People were picking against them to lose to Oregon State. Everybody thought they were going to lose to Oregon. But for all you guys that have been following the podcast all season long, going back to in the preseason when I picked Washington to win the Pac-12 and to make it to the college football playoffs, I've been telling you that styles make fights. And stylistically, Washington was a bad matchup for Texas because Texas' biggest weakness all season long was their secondary. And when you got a wide receiving core this deep and this talented with a quarterback that has this level of efficiency, you're going to have a hard time being able to get stops. Fuck what the recruiting rankings say. Who cares if Texas has the more talented roster by recruiting? Recruiting doesn't mean anything. You still have to be able to go out there and show it on the field and prove it. And I was wrong about that. That's the same reason why I got, proved wrong in that Michigan-Alabama game, because I thought Alabama was going to win that game because of recruiting. But you see, stars don't really matter all that much in today's age of college football with the whole NIL and transfer portal era. Think about it. Michael Penix came from the portal. Dylan Johnson came from the portal, transferred from Mississippi State. So with the portal now, it has allowed teams like Washington, who may not be able to recruit at the level that Texas has, to be able to close the gap by being able to bring guys in from the portal that fit what they want to do stylistically. And Washington, this is one of those teams that they're like one of those vintage Mike Leach Texas Tech teams. Like, they don't need the run game to be able to beat you. Dylan Johnson is out. We don't know if he's going to be able to suit up for the national title game. But even if he can't play, I still don't think that it changes too many things about how that game is going to go. Washington is a team that wins based on how well they can throw the football. And there's not any team in America that's going to be able to stop this passing attack. Not even Michigan. They may be able to slow it down, but it's hard to stop a team that has 3 elite receivers. 3 first-round caliber wide receivers, and they're not undersized. All of these guys have great size. They're like 6 foot or taller, and they're like 190 or more. So for Washington, this was a big-time win for this program. This is the most publicity that Washington football has received since they last made it to the playoffs a while back when they lost to Alabama with Chris Peterson. You can never try to count out a team that has great coaching. And college football's best kept secret all season long was Kalen DeBoer. This was somebody who was winning championships at NAIA. He's won at every single level. This dude doesn't have more than 11 losses combined. Not at Washington, but in his whole entire career coaching. Not only is this dude a stud head coach, but he has a stud coaching staff. So that's why I was so blowed with the mismanagement and almost choking the game away late in the fourth quarter, because this team has been so much better than that. This is normally a team that executes very well and they don't beat themselves. But the fact that they were able to overcome a near mishap shows you just how good and how well coached this team is. For Texas, I think that there's a lot of things to be optimistic about going into 2024. You got a big bankroll down there, so you're going to have the talent to be able to win in the SEC. That shouldn't be a question for anybody saying that, man, Texas ain't going to be ready for the SEC. You sound foolish. Because from a talent standpoint, they're just as good as Georgia and Alabama. They can buy anybody in recruiting. They can buy anybody in the transfer portal. The pockets run deep down there in Texas. And they probably got the deepest pockets out of any team in college football. They got the unlimited money glitch down there. So they're going to be fine. It all comes down to just how good of a coach is Steve Sarkisian moving forward. Has this dude truly turned the corner? Has he become one of the up-and-coming great coaches in college football? Time will tell. But Kalen DeBoer, this dude is a prodigy. I don't know how many of you guys watch Naruto, but he's like the Itachi of college football coaches. Kalen DeBoer, with how good of a coach he is and how good of a quarterback Michael Penix is and how deep they are at wide receiver, having a great offensive line and a defense that's more than capable of being able to get a couple of stops, there's not a single reason why they can't beat Michigan. So let me know what your thoughts were on this game down in the comment section down below. Before we move on, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I got to get me a little sip of water real quick. Remember that every episode of the podcast that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button, man. We got a lot of you guys in the chat right now. Hit that like button, man. Helps us out a lot with the algorithm. Helps us get more attention on the live stream. So hit that like button if you haven't already. Shout out to my guy Ron Dolan in the chat who says Kalen DeBoer is 25-2, 21 game win streak. Penix 130 yards. UW for real. These boys are for real, man. I got my championship prediction coming later. Who is going to win? Michigan, Washington? Leave your picks down in the comment section down below. Now, we got to talk about a serious matter right now. You know, as a diehard college football fan, it really hurts my heart to hear people calling bowl games meaningless. And now we got this big problem in college football where bowl games have now lost their luster to the point where people are now contemplating if they should just be thrown in the trash and you should just get rid of them altogether. And you see, the people who call college football bowl games meaningless are the same people who get mad when these players decide to opt out of them. Like, you can't call these bowl games meaningless and tweet it out and not expect these players to see. Like, if you're calling these bowl games meaningless on social media, you don't think these players see that? If you're calling them meaningless and you don't think they're worth anything, then what do you expect these players to view them as? You see, there are reasons for why college football is the way that it is right now, and it mainly is because of the coverage that the college football playoffs gets. You see, bowl games have become meaningless in a lot of players' eyes and a lot of people's eyes, not because of the bowl games themselves, and not because there's too many of them, but simply for the fact that all people care about is the college football playoffs. That's all they talk about all throughout the season. If your team has 2-3 losses and they're not able to get into the playoffs, then you don't matter anymore. They don't talk about you anymore. If you're not in the playoffs, then what you're doing is irrelevant. And that's where college football has started to take a turn, with some of the traditions that have made this sport so great now starting to kind of go a little bit extinct. You see, I remember there was a day and age in college football where you never saw players opt out for a bowl game. You want to know why? Because players had pride for their programs. Why do the bowl games matter? Because it's another chance to play another game for their university that they spent 3-4 years with. Oh wait, there's not too many players spending 3-4 years with a program anymore because of the transfer portal and NIL. You want to know something funny? All of FSU's best players opted out of their bowl game against Georgia in the Orange Bowl. Why? Oh, well, they were just so crushed that they didn't get into the playoffs. What was the reason for them playing? Okay, let me ask you this. Alabama didn't get into the playoffs last year. And Will Anderson, Bryce Young, Jahmyr Gibbs all played in their bowl game against Kansas State. And this isn't the first time Alabama has had this happen. A couple of while back, when they beat the shit out of Michigan in the Citrus Bowl, everybody that was a projected first rounder played in that game. Christian Barmore, Jalen Waddle, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy. So why is it that these bowl games are only meaningless to players that don't play for Alabama? If these Alabama players are suiting up for bowl games, why is it that these other programs can't have the same thing happening? You want to know why? Because there are so many teams that have built their programs through the transfer portal that these players that you get from the portal, they don't have that same level of dedication and commitment to wanting to leave out on top of a program. You see, Alabama players, the reason why they played against Kansas State last year is because they wanted to finish what they started. Will Anderson wanted to leave out with one more win to add to his Alabama career. Same thing with Bryce Young. And Jahmyr Gibbs was a guy from the portal. And he played in that game. You want to know why? Because when you already have a built culture, one guy from the portal just falls in line with everything else. And that's something that we don't have in college football anymore. You don't have a lot of rosters comprised of players that have been there for 3-4 years. So you don't have players that are as dedicated to the program as what they've been in the past. You see, why do these bowl games matter? Because it's competition. You should want to go out there and have another opportunity to compete if you're a fifth-year senior, to lay it on the line for the university that gave you an opportunity to play college football. We don't have that anymore. And what really makes me upset is that people forget what has made college football the sport that it is today. What makes college football such a great sport is the tradition and pageantry. These rivalries get so much viewership not because of them being big brands, but because these rivalries stem back from 100 years ago. The game has so much meaning, not just because it's Michigan and Ohio State, but because how long these two schools have been going to war. Football is about rivalries. It's about tradition. It's about pageantry, and that's everything that college football is. And with people now trying to make bowl games out to be meaningless, you're watering down one of college football's oldest traditions. The first bowl game was in 1902. You know what it was? It was the Rose Bowl. You want to know why watching the Rose Bowl was such a spectacle? Because it's the granddaddy of college football. Tradition and pageantry is what makes this sport so great. And now people want to ruin it by extending the college football playoffs to not just 12 teams, but 24 teams. At the end of the day, you don't have to watch bowl games if you don't watch them. Okay? If you don't want to see a bowl game, you don't have to watch it. But me, don't know about you, this is my favorite time of the college football season. Because I can wake up on a random day on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday during the second week to January. Well, during the second week of December to the first week of January and watch a random bowl game. Like I was watching Texas A&M play against somebody in their bowl game. And it was a great game. I was watching them play Oklahoma State. I was watching the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I was watching the Cheeses Bowl. I was watching the Duke Mayo Bowl. Bowl season is for people who don't get enough football during the regular season, who just need more football in their life. Why is everybody so against bowl games when all they give you is more football, more entertainment? You see, like, these bowl games aren't meaningless. They're only meaningless because the college football playoffs has made them meaningless. Because if you're not in the playoffs, you don't matter. Oh, well, why would anybody want to see a 6-6 team versus a 6-6 team in a bowl game? Because we love football, damn it. It's a bad thing that I love watching football. So I got to get penalized for what bowl games getting taken away? Well, JT, the 12-team playoffs is going to fix it all. Yeah, we get a couple more extra playoff games. Hooray. But what about the other 30, 40 bowl games that we get to miss out on? The 40 extra games of college football. You know, like, football is only a 3-4 month sport, right? Once it ends, you got to wait 7 months for it to start back up again. So you should cherish the opportunity to watch every single bowl game possible if you truly love this sport. And you see, if you want to know a way to fix the whole bowl season problem in college football, you know what I think they should do? Maybe stop allowing players to hit the transfer portal before the season officially ends. Maybe stop allowing coaches to leave for other jobs before the season ends. You know, like, the reason why this sport is in the condition that it is right now is because they made so many rule changes and they didn't think about the implications of these rule changes. What sense does it make that players can just opt out of a bowl game and hit the transfer portal before the season officially ends? What sense does it make that a coach can leave for a job before the season ends? That makes no sense to me. Like, Willie Fritz should have not been permitted to leave for Houston until he fulfilled his contractual obligations to Tulane, which is coaching in their final bowl game. You know, like, nobody cares about that anymore. Like, everybody was always saying how we need more player mobility. These coaches can leave anytime they want, so why can't the players? Well, you got player mobility now, and now everybody's mad that these players are deciding to hit the portal and opt out of these bowl games, but everybody was all for player mobility in the transfer portal. You see, the problem is that everybody wanted to get their cake, and they wanted to eat it too. But you see, when you change one thing in college football, you take away from another. Now the only thing that matters in this sport is college football, and I'm not an old age college football fan. I'm not 40, 50 years old on a soapbox screaming about college football used to be so much better in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like, I'm a new age college football fan. I started watching college football in 2010. The first championship game I ever watched was Cam Newton and Auburn against Oregon, and it was a classic. Now I look at the state that college football is in, like, a couple years later, and it's not the same anymore because of everything and all the changes that have taken place. Like, what happened to Florida State in the Orange Bowl was an absolute travesty. Like, these dudes were so depleted that they had to have wide receivers playing running back. That's how much lack of depth they had because of all the opt-outs they had, plus players hitting the transfer portal. Their damn backup quarterback hit the transfer portal when he really should have played in this game, because this game would have provided him with an opportunity to prove himself. Like, the transfer portal has ruined bowl season. NIL has ruined bowl season. Player mobility and coach mobility has ruined bowl season. You want to make bowl season better? You should first start off with not allowing these coaches and players to leave until after the season concludes. That's just common sense. Another way that you can make this better is by giving out compensation to players based on how prestigious the bowl game that they're playing is. So let's say that the Rose Bowl doesn't get a playoff game. Well, if you have a team that makes it to a Rose Bowl game, then they should get $20,000 if they're winners. And you just divvy that up amongst the players, or you just give a certain amount of money to each player on that team. If you make it to the Tax Layer Bowl, you only get $2,000 per player because the Tax Layer Bowl isn't as prestigious as what the Rose Bowl is. If you make it to the Orange Bowl, you get $20,000. You play in the Duke Mayo Bowl or the Cheeses Bowl or middle tier bowl game, you get $10,000. So the more prestigious the bowl game is, the more compensation the players get. You see, we're in a money-driven world. Money runs the world, rather people want to admit it or not. So I would never get upset with the player for opting out to protect his draft stock when there's millions of dollars in this at stake in this. You feel me? But players opting out, hitting the transfer portal before the season ends, that doesn't sit well with me. It makes no sense that you should be allowed to transfer before the season officially ends. That's one of the stupidest things that has ever been permitted to go on in college football. You see, you can't be one of those people that scream out how bowl games are meaningless on Twitter or X, whatever people call it, but then get mad when players opt out because they don't take these bowl games seriously. You see, you guys who are saying these bowl games are meaningless, you're just as big as a problem as the players themselves, because you are reinforcing an idea and a narrative that they see. These players see everything. They use social media too. They're humans too. They have an Explore page. They get recommended tweets all the time. And if you're a player and you are projected to be a first, second round pick, and you see a tweet from Garrett Wilson saying how bowl games suck, and you see a tweet from John Who saying how bowl games are meaningless, what the hell would make you want to play in it? If everybody thinks they're meaningless and they're not going to watch, why play in it? What's the purpose? So the fans who are complaining about this, who are hypocrites, you're just as much as the problem as everything else. You see, I wish people would just enjoy bowl season for what it is. Another chance to watch your favorite team play before the season ends, or another chance to watch another football game before you have to go 7-8 months without another one. Like, what the hell am I going to watch when college football and the NFL season are over? What, the UFL? Hell, even that has to end. So, I mean, I don't get why people are so against bowl games. Like, if you don't like bowl games, you don't have to watch them. That's really what frustrates me. We got too many bowl games. Says who? What's wrong with there being too many bowl games? What the fuck does them having 60 bowl games have anything to do with you? Is that hurting you? Is having 50, 60 bowl games hurting you and hindering from you doing what you want to do in life? No, it doesn't. Let the people who enjoy watching bowl games like me and whoever else enjoy watching bowl games without trying to diminish them. We have watered down college football so much that the only thing that matters is making it to the playoffs, when this sport was never just about who was going to win the national championship. What has made college football what it has become today has been greed and money. And these fans that now are just only caring about the playoffs. And ESPN is part of this problem too, bro. Like, I remember one day on game day, like Pat McAfee said he wasn't going to talk about the team because they were irrelevant because they weren't in the playoffs. Like, that's one of the worst statements that you can ever make. Because if you truly follow college football and you truly understand what makes this sport what it is and what it used to be in the past, is because of tradition, pageantry. And now we just are trying to get rid of tradition. We now want to abolish part of what makes this sport what it is. It's so sad that I'm only 21 years old and now I'm starting to sound like an old head. Now I get what Josh Pate was talking about when he was like, be careful what you wish for. I get why everybody else was so against, the transfer portal to a certain extent, NIL to a certain extent. You know, these players and coaches being able to leave anytime they want, even expanding the playoffs to begin with, because nobody really thought about the ramifications that were going to come from that. Now we got the playoffs. Now we're going to expand to 12 teams and we get more playoff games, but we get less bowl games. I don't want that. People are like, you don't want more football? Bro, we get more football. We get that with bowl season. Oh, well, bowl games are meaningless. Says who? You? You're not playing in them. So why do you care? It's only meaningless because you don't want to watch it. Cool, if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. We're going to have meaningless playoff games soon. Like, not every playoff game in the semifinal is going to be competitive. If Michigan was to go against Tulane this year, or whoever was the highest ranked G5 school, which was Liberty, like Liberty got crushed by Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. If you think that that's going to be an entertaining matchup next year, okay. Like, you're still going to have blowouts. You're still going to have games that aren't that competitive. Like, I like watching bowl season because I like watching extra football. I like watching these exhibition games. And if I was a player and I spent 3-4 years with a program, I wouldn't opt out. I would play because I want to make sure that I go out on top, given my university that I spent 3-4 years of my life with, all my dedication, all my pride, because that's what they earned. You know, like, if you give me a scholarship, you give me NIL opportunities, you give me a chance to showcase my ability on the biggest stage, why would I not feel indebted to you to finish what I started? That's why Alabama and the culture that Nick Saban has built is not comparable to any other program in the sport. Hell, even Ohio State, yeah, they have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyle McCord who hit the portal not play, but they had a good amount of players who were starters who played in that game. JT, Timmy Muau. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but he's going to be a first-round pick without a doubt. And he might have just improved his draft stock without he played against Missouri. Like, I know it sounds like I'm rambling on here and I'm all over the place, but all I'm trying to say is that these bowl games aren't meaningless. ESPN and the whole college football playoff coverage has made them become watered down because they have emphasized that if you're not in the playoffs, you don't matter. Like, I've never ever thought I would hear the day when somebody said the Orange Bowl was a meaningless game. Like, what? Do you not know the history behind the Orange Bowl, bro? Man, y'all making me sound like I'm 67 years old. Like, I'm not like one of those people that is against change. I'm excited for the 12-team college football playoffs. But it's not going to be what you think. All it's going to be is the SEC Big Ten Invitational. Oh, well, you don't know. Yes, I do, bro. Let's not be foolish. The ACC is about to disband. The Pac-12 is done. Look what's happened to college football. Everything that everybody thought would have made this sport better has taken away what has made this sport so great in the past. Oh, college football is heading in a great direction. Yeah, you say that until it looks damn near equivalent to what the NFL is, and I don't think any of us want that. The only thing that makes college football what it is now and gives us that college football vibe is the atmosphere of the games. When you go to a college football game, you're not going to get that same experience that you would at an NFL game. The different traditions, you know, the different fight songs. Like college football, I don't like the direction this thing is headed. And if they take away bowl games, I'm going to be really upset. And I'm damn near about to shed a tear about it because I love bowl season. I love college football. And I love what has made this sport what it is today. Tradition and pageantry. And now people want to take away that part of it. Well, not everything is meant to last forever. We get that. But certain things are supposed to be implemented to make things better, not make it worse. We've made college football worse in the sense with all these transfer portal and NIL things that we've implemented in these things with no regulation. I'm finna move on, man. I know you guys are tired of me venting about college football's bowl problem, but that really hits different. You know, like I really love bowl season. It's one of my favorite things to do during December when I'm on winter break. Watch bowl games. I love being able to watch a random bowl game on Monday night at 9 o'clock. Like, I just love watching football, bro. And taking away bowl season, would kind of be taking away a piece of college football history, in my opinion. History should be relished. We should be trying to maintain college football's greatest traditions. And bowl games are part of that. The Houston Texans are taking on the Indianapolis Colts. This is a playoff game. The winner of this game locks in the spot in the playoffs. The loser is going home. They're going to start their offseason early. The question is, who's going to be that team to start their offseason early and take that luxurious trip home back to the couch? Now, the last time these two teams faced off against each other, the Indianapolis Colts won in convincing fashion. So what does Houston need to do this time to avoid getting swept by Indy? Well, the good thing is that C.J. Stroud came back against the Tennessee Titans last week, and he looked good as what he was prior to missing a couple of games. And you're going to need him to have a superstar level performance and able to have a shot at winning this game, because these are the kinds of games where a guy like C.J. Stroud is supposed to show you why he was drafted second overall. And he's had the greatest rookie season that we've ever seen out of a first-year quarterback. But in a game like this has to be his best performance of the season. When your franchise quarterback needs to step up is when the playoffs are on the line. Indianapolis, they're one of those teams that are opportunists. They're like edge. If you give them turnovers and you give them extra possessions, or you're coming up short in the red zone, they're going to make you pay. Anytime the Colts have won, it's been because mostly they've won the turnover battle. Look what happened when they played Pittsburgh. Hell, look what happened when they lost to the Falcons. What happened when they lost to Atlanta? Oh, they didn't win the turnover battle. Oh, Atlanta didn't beat themselves. As long as Houston doesn't beat themselves, they're going to have a shot at winning this thing. Indianapolis doesn't have a great defense. Their defense is mostly predicated off their ability to generate takeaways. If they can't generate takeaways, they struggle against the run. They struggle against the pass. They just got their ass beat by the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons beat Indianapolis. Think about that. You want to know why? Because when you're a team that wins off misfortunes of your opponents, it's not a consistent way of being able to win. Now, that doesn't take away from what makes Indianapolis the team that they are right now, being eligible for the playoffs, because if they were a team that only won based off takeaways, then they wouldn't be that great. But they're well coached. You know, they don't really make a lot of mistakes. But Gardner Minshew at the helm at QB, he does have moments where he throws a lot of YOLO balls, when he's just throwing the ball in a double coverage, triple coverage, and he's not really paying attention to going through his progressions and paying attention to who's open. He's just throwing that football just to throw it. Houston has a really great defense. It may not be an elite defense, but it's a great defense when everybody's fully healthy. And even with Will Anderson being questionable, you still feel really good about Houston's ability to stop the run in this game. Because last time they played against each other, Indianapolis had a fantastic day running the football down Houston's defense. So if you're DeMeco Ryans, you need to do everything that you can of slowing down the rushing attack of the Indianapolis Colts. If you can force Indy to become one-dimensional of Gardner Minshew, that secondary that has been fantastic at generating interceptions and takeaways, they're going to have the opportunity to come away with at least 2 or 3 of them going against Gardner Minshew. Houston has the obvious quarterback advantage in this game. All right, and when you have the quarterback advantage in a game like this, in a playoff atmosphere, it's huge. Because the majority of the times, the teams that go the furthest in the playoffs are the teams that get consistent, great quarterback play. You need great quarterbacks, or at least good quarterback play, to be able to win these games. If Gardner Minshew is able to give you that, then that's going to vote well for Indianapolis' chances of being able to win this game. And Indianapolis is a well-coached team in their own right. DeMeco Ryans is a stud head coach, but so is Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen is an offensive-minded coach. DeMeco Ryans is a defensive-minded coach. Something's going to have to give in this game. Something is going to have to give. Not only is this a playoff elimination game, winner gets in, loser goes home on the couch, but also the winner has a potential chance of winning the AFC South and getting a home field playoff game for that first round. If the Jaguars lose and let's say the Texans win this game or the Colts win this game, then they win the AFC South. And I would be doing a major disservice to both of these teams if I didn't commend them on even being in this position. Before the season started, nobody thought the Texans and the Colts were going to be good. Everybody thought that Houston and Indianapolis were at most going to win 6 games, nothing more than that. The reason why these two teams are in this position is because they've been well coached, and also they've had pretty decent quarterback play. Gardner Minshew hasn't been great, and there's been games when Indianapolis has mostly won in spite of him, but he's been serviceable enough that they've found ways to win games with him being their backup QB. Houston, when they played the Colts in, early in the season, week 2, when they last won, or when they lost, Anthony Richardson was the quarterback. And it's way different having to find out a way to stop an offense that has Derrick Henry at quarterback damn near 6'5", 255 pounds, running 4.43 than it is when you're game planning to stop Gardner Minshew. I mean, that dude, Anthony Richardson, is a damn freight truck. So when you got to face off against Gardner Minshew the second go around, that gives me a lot of confidence in Houston's defense. Gardner Minshew is a serviceable QB, but when you got C.J. Stroud on the other opposite end, that should give Houston the advantage, regardless of the injuries that they have on defense. C.J. Stroud is the reason why I'm taking the Texans to get this win. This dude has had the best rookie season that we've ever seen. To me, he's been a top 5 quarterback this year. And since this is a playoff game, I'm going to go with the team that has the playoff advantage. And that is having a star quarterback. Having a star quarterback gives you a better opportunity at going far in the playoffs than it does when you have a guy like Gardner Minshew. Because you see, C.J. Stroud is good enough to overcome certain limitations. Gardner Minshew isn't. If Indianapolis can't run the football, they're not going to have a chance at hell at being able to win this game, especially if Gardner Minshew is going to have to lead this team to a win with his arm against a secondary that's red hot right now at forcing turnovers. Houston doesn't need the run game to be able to beat this team. All they need is for C.J. Stroud to show up and do what he's done all season long. If this is one of those games when C.J. Stroud goes off like how he did against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is pretty much going to be a guaranteed victory for Houston. I don't think there's any way the Texans should lose this game unless they just implode on themselves. And I don't think that's going to happen. I believe the Texans are going to get one up on the Colts this go around, and I think they even up this thing at 1-1, and they're going to clinch their spot in the playoffs this year. We got the Buffalo Bills taking on the Miami Dolphins in the AFC East Championship, people. Winner of this game wins this division. They clinch their spot in the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Dolphins already have their playoff spot secured, but Buffalo, though, not only do they need to win this game to win this division, but they need to win this game to solidify themselves as a playoff team, because if they lose and a couple of other things go left for them, they're going to find themselves out of the playoffs, and they might be one of the most talented teams to never make it into the playoffs with a potential loss. Now, the last time we saw the Bills and the Dolphins play, the Dolphins were coming off a 70-point performance against Denver, and they got absolutely took to the woodshed by the Buffalo Bills, and they got humbled in a big way. It was 48-20 in that thing. What has to happen differently for the Dolphins to turn this thing around? Because the Dolphins don't play well against good teams. Their best win was against the Dallas Cowboys. How did they beat Dallas? Well, their defense played great. And it might have been the best defensive performance that the Dolphins have had all season long against a great offense. You're going to need that same defense that showed up in your win against Dallas to show up in this game against the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen has a lot of success against these Vic Fangio-style defenses. Vic Fangio, he's going to have to switch some things up. Josh Allen hasn't played great the last 2 weeks, but we know what Josh Allen does. In big games, this dude always shows up. The Dolphins offense is going to have to show up just as much as how this defense is going to show up. And this defense, they're now down their 2 top pass rushers. Bradley Chubb is done. Jalen Phillips got injured a couple of weeks ago on that Black Friday game against the New York Jets. So your secondary is going to have to be able to limit the amount of big plays that this Buffalo Bills passing attack is able to generate. How are you going to be able to guard against a Dalton Kincaid? Well, Javon Holland is there at safety. You now have Jalen Ramsey, who you didn't have the first time you went up against the Buffalo Bills. You got Xavier Howard. You're going to need those guys on the back end to have really big performances in this game. Jalen Ramsey should be able to match up pretty well against Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is still one of the top receivers in the game, but he hasn't had the same level of success this season that we've seen him have the last couple of years in Buffalo. If you can take away the passing game and this becomes a game when Josh Allen's just running around and he's just picking up yardage with his legs, I think you can live with that. What you can't live with is Josh Allen shredding you down the field. You see, the Dolphins have a really good run defense. James Cook has been a revelation for the Buffalo Bills this season, and we saw what he did to the Dallas Cowboys. So you got to figure out a way to not only limit the big plays in the passing game if you're Miami, but you got to be able to stop this rushing attack of Buffalo. And when you stop this rushing attack of Buffalo, and you can get Buffalo in a situation where they just have to win this game throwing it with Josh Allen, okay, they still can win that way, but you got the opportunity to come away with turnovers. And the difference in Buffalo's offense playing at the level that they have been playing at the last month or so has been because not only them making that offensive coordinator change with Joe Brady, but it's because Joe Brady has put a lot more emphasis on having a balanced offense. Get Buffalo back in the situation where Josh Allen has to carry them to a win. Josh Allen, he can carry you to a win, but it won't be without a couple of mistakes along the way. And that's when this defense comes in. You should be able to force the Buffalo Bills in a situation where Josh Allen gives you the football a couple of times. And that's when your offense has to be able to take advantage of those points off turnovers. We know Josh Allen is going to turn the rock over in this game. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because that's just the kind of player that Josh Allen is. This dude is a gunslinger. He's going to take a lot of chances. He has a really aggressive playing style. So make him pay for his aggressiveness. This Dolphins offense has to show up. I got more confidence in Miami's defense than I do the Dolphins offense. Anytime this team goes up against a great defense, they always no-show. They put up 70 points against the Denver Broncos, but they can't do that shit against a good team. They got embarrassed on the road against the Baltimore Ravens. And they're the second best team in the AFC right now based on record. And it didn't look like that last week. Anytime you get the 1 versus 2 seed in your conference, you would think that would be an instant classic. And it was an instant turnoff. The Miami Dolphins need this offense to at least be able to score 28 to 30 points. I'm sick and tired of Dolphins fans talking about how talented their offense is and how this is one of, if not the most explosive offense in the league. But yeah, I never see that shit anytime they go up against a great defense. Buffalo's defense is fantastic, even with all the injuries that they've had. And Von Miller, this dude has been a no-show this season. He was a healthy scratch last week, if I'm not mistaken. And yet they still played at a fantastic level with injuries to their star linebacker, Matt Milano. Injuries on the back end of the secondary. This offense needs to be able to score 28 points if they want to have a shot at winning this thing. Your defense, even with the injuries to your top pass rushers, they can keep you in this game. I trust Vic Fangio and what he is as a defensive coordinator, being the highest paid DC in the league, to be able to make the necessary tweaks and adjustments so Josh Allen doesn't put 48 on him like how he did when y'all last saw each other. Buffalo, what do you need to do to walk away with the victory in this game? Well, first of all, you need to do what you've been doing when you've been playing your best football, which is being balanced offensively, mixing the pass with the run. Miami is really good against the run, but we didn't see that last week against the Baltimore Ravens all too much, and they gave up a lot of big plays in the passing game. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you know what your big X factor is in this game? James Cook. And like I told y'all when they went up against the Dallas Cowboys, James Cook is going to be the X factor for you in this game because he's a mismatch for anybody that's lining up against him on that Dolphins defense. Their linebackers are not great in coverage. And they definitely aren't going to be able to guard a guy in James Cook that runs routes just as good as a wide receiver. James Cook's route running is the equivalent to the route running that you would get from a wide receiver 3. So not only do you need to get James Cook involved on the ground, but also get him involved in the passing game. And I don't mean by just throwing swings and screen passes to him. No, like have him running routes that involve him having to run downfield and having to rile up these linebackers or whoever is going to be a safety lining up against him. He's a major mismatch and a major nightmare for this Dolphins defense to have to game plan for. His speed, his explosiveness, and how dynamic he is with the ball in his hands is going to be a problem in itself. And on top of that, with his route running, nobody on the Dolphins is going to want to have to game plan for this. Nobody even wants to see this. That would be the worst case scenario. James Cook having another performance when he goes off against this Dolphins defense like he did against the Dallas Cowboys. The Dolphins don't have anybody capable of being able to cover this dude. If anything, if Josh Allen has one of those games where he kind of is a little bit too aggressive and he's turning the football over at a pretty high rate, or you can't get anything going on offense, you should run this offense through James Cook. James Cook is a good enough player where you can run this offense through him and you can still have a lot of success. Doesn't mean that you don't have to use Josh Allen at all, but it just means that when you can use James Cook, it takes a lot of time off the clock. You can run a ball control offense and you can put more pressure on that Dolphins offense of having to score points. Defensively, Sean McDermott already has the game plan against this offense because everybody seems to have the game plan against this offense. This offense only looks cutting edge when they're going against a terrible team. When they go up against a great defense, they struggle. Why do they struggle? Because they can't generate big plays downfield and because most of their offense is predicated on what they do after the catch. Buffalo is one of the best tackling teams in the NFL, just like how the Ravens were. So if you tackle well and you don't give up a lot of big plays over the top, you got the recipe to stop in this offense. Plus, their offensive line is banged up right now. And you got one of the best pass rushes in all of the NFL. You don't got Von Miller, but you got a lot of other guys who are more than capable of being able to get after the quarterback. And you're really deep on the defensive line. That's been one of the biggest strengths of your defense. Miami, the biggest issue for them, it seems like going into matchups like this always is how they match up front on the offensive line. And it always feels like they're at a disadvantage on that side. And like we saw against Baltimore, if you can limit the amount of big plays that they generate after the catch, you got the key to slowing down this offense. Tua Tagovailoa doesn't do anything special in these kinds of games. Last week against Baltimore, I saw this dude throw an interception before the 2-minute mark, and that's eventually when the game started to turn in Baltimore's favor, and they ran away with it. Force the Miami Dolphins to get so one-dimensional that they have no choice but to throw the football with Tua, and then you're going to be able to just completely neutralize this offense. For Miami's offense to be able to successfully be able to sustain efficiency, they got to run the football. And they are capable of being able to run the football. And the Bills, what can scare me in this game, I talked about how much of a matchup nightmare James Cook can be. Let's talk about Devon Achane. Devon Achane has been one of the best rookie running backs in the National Football League this year. This dude is probably the fastest running back in the game. And they already got another fast running back in Raheem Mostert. With Devon Achane, you can get him the ball and, screen plays, halfback, you just got to find a way to get Devon Achane the ball. You give this guy the ball and he has just a little bit of a crease, he's a threat to take it to the house any single time. I call him an ATM, an automatic touchdown machine, and that's what he is. And last week against Baltimore, they had a good amount of success when they went to him on the ground when Raheem Mostert wasn't able to suit up for this game, and I don't know why they went away from that. You see, the Dolphins, their offense has the ability to be balanced. It's just that Mike McDaniels, for some reason, he just doesn't care about running the football that much. He's just a pass-heavy guy. The Dolphins need to go heavy on running the football in this game with Devon Achane. The Bills got a pretty good run defense, but I don't know how they're going to be able to slow down a dude with this kind of game-changing speed. When you have somebody that has this kind of speed, it's really hard to stop, and it's really hard to try to find a way to prepare for it. Miami, what they don't do is what they should do, which is be more balanced. You don't have to try to beat everybody, trying to be Mike Leach, old air raid. Be balanced. Play complementary football. That's why you continue to lose to these great teams and why your offense underperforms, because everybody knows what you want to do. If I know what you want to do, try to get a lot of yak or try to generate some big plays downfield, then so do these other teams. These teams already have the game plan for being able to beat you, so throw something different at them. What would be something that could potentially get Buffalo's defense a little discombobulated would be your dedication to the run game. Go out there and run the football at least 15 times with Devon A-Chain. Now, he isn't the biggest guy, and you're definitely not going to run him up the middle a lot, but you definitely can get him going off the edge. Try to get some halfback stretches or try to get some zone runs to the outside going and try to mix things up. Just don't make it to the point where you're just so one-dimensional on offense because of play calling. Like the Buffalo Bills defensively, they never really have to do too much against you when they already know what's coming. And there's not a team that knows you better than a team that you have to play 2 times in the season. And the worst thing you would want to see if you're a Dolphins fan is having to play the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. Imagine if you get the 2 seed and the Bills get in at the 7 seed. You have to see them in the first round again, potentially. You don't want that. That's a bad matchup. You need to win this game so you can clinch this division and win the AFC East. Now, Buffalo, a loss here potentially could end your season if the Steelers get a win against the Baltimore Ravens backups, which has a very good chance of happening. The team I'm going to take to win this game, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. I can't trust the Miami Dolphins, bro. Like, if this offense was way more complimentary and they did a better job at running the football, and they were able to mix that in with the pass, they wouldn't have the problems that they have offensively in big games. Their problem is that they only care about throwing the football, and they don't put any emphasis on trying to throw anything else different at the defense, so the defense knows what's coming. If they can't run the football effectively with Devon A-Chain, I really feel they got a great chance at winning this game, but they're not, because that's not what the Dolphins are. And until they make that identity shift or that philosophy shift, offensively, they're going to continue to struggle offensively when they go up against the best defenses in the National Football League. The Dolphins haven't put more than, 22 points up against a great defense, and that was the Dallas Cowboys. That was it. They didn't do anything against the Philadelphia Eagles. They didn't do anything against the Kansas City Chiefs, and they barely did anything in their win against Dallas. And we know what happened against the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't do nothing. So I'm taking Buffalo. I just got more confidence in the Buffalo Bills in this game because you got Josh Allen, who is the better quarterback. You got Sean McDermott, who already has the game plan for stopping this Dolphins offense. And this is a Dolphins team that hasn't showed us anything but the fact that they're always going to lose, and they're guaranteed to lose anytime they go up against a team that is remotely as good as what they are record-wise. And if the Dolphins had the toughest schedule in the NFL, they probably wouldn't even be a playoff team, or they probably would be a borderline playoff team. Like, this team has been fairly disappointing. You look at their record and you say, oh, they're a pretty good team, but I look at their wins, and you don't really have any wins that show how good of a team you truly are. You just have wins when you're putting up 70 points against the Denver Broncos. Kudos. You put 70 on the Denver Broncos, and then the following week, Buffalo drops 48 on you. I just can't trust Miami in this game. They just going to have to show me. Before I move on and give you guys my national championship prediction, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, man. Whew. You know, this is always my favorite and least favorite time of the college football season, because once the national championship is over, we got to wait 7 months until we get college football again. Unless you care about the spring games, which I do, but it's like the spring games are cool, but it's nothing like the real thing. Man, I hope y'all didn't get too turned off about my rant about the problem with bowl season in college football, because I really put my heart into that segment, bro. Like, I really love bowl season in college football. I hope that it doesn't go away, truthfully. So let's get into it. National championship time, people. National championship time, people. Washington versus Michigan. Number 1 versus number 2. This is the national championship that we all deserve. 14-0 versus 14-0. Who's going to win this thing? This is one of the most interesting national championship games that I can recall in the last couple of years, because you got two teams that are really different stylistically. Michigan is a tough, hard-nosed football team that not only are you going to have to go to war for them for 60 minutes, but you're about to get ready to go to battle against a team that is ready to impose their will against you. And they're a more physical team than what Washington is. And that was pretty apparent with what they did to Alabama's offensive line. They got 6 sacks on Jalen Milroe. Alabama couldn't get anything going in the passing game. And Washington is something that Michigan has not seen all season long. They haven't seen a team that has the kind of offensive philosophy that Washington has. You see, Washington isn't a team that needs the run game to be effective offensively. As a matter of fact, they don't need the running game at all. Like, their star running back, Dylan Johnson, he may not be able to go in this game. I don't think it's too big of a loss when you got 3 NFL caliber wide receivers. And it's really difficult for any defense to shut down an offense that has 3 NFL wide receivers that are big-bodied, really long, lengthy, and incredibly fast. Rome Odunze is going to be probably matched up against Will Johnson. Will Johnson is one of the best cornerbacks in all of college football. We're going to see just how good he is when he's going against Rome Odunze. And they got a really good secondary. You got Mike Sanders still. You got a lot of other guys there. These guys are really going to get tested against this Washington secondary. Defensively, Michigan has the formula for being able to slow down this offense. You see, Washington hasn't seen a defense like Michigan. Now, against Texas, you went up against a team that was pretty stout on their front 7, but they didn't have it on the back end. Michigan, they have everything. They got a fantastic front 7, a defensive line that can get after you, and an incredible secondary. And the last time Washington went up against a team that had a similar style of play that Michigan has, it was Oregon State. And that Oregon State game was fairly close. Oregon State, they're not exactly like Michigan, but they have a little bit of the same mentality that Michigan has. They're tough. They're really good up front. Washington has the best offensive line in college football, according to the people who give out the Joe Moore Award, which goes to the best offensive line in college football. And a lot of people were shocked at the fact that Washington's offensive line gave up 0 sacks against Texas, who had one of the better pass rushes in college football. Michigan was getting pressure on Jalen Milroe, no matter if it was just rushing for or if they were sending everybody. Against Michael Penix, you got to find a way to make this dude uncomfortable in the pocket. Because if you give this dude all day to throw and you can't get after him, then the same thing that happened to Texas is going to happen to you. Michael Penix was unconscious in that semifinal game against Texas. He was stepping up in the pocket. He was making great throws. Even when there was a little bit of pressure in his face, he can do everything. He has a good amount of mobility to pick up a couple of yards here and there. If you give him a little bit of green grass, he's going to be more difficult to game plan for than what Jalen Milroe was. Because Jalen Milroe isn't that great of a passer. All you have to worry about was keeping this guy inside the pocket. Michael Penix, he can do it all. Run, throw it, anything. And these wide receivers, they're like cheat codes. If you just give them a little bit of a free release off the line, they're going to kill you downfield. Michigan's defense has to play their best defense that we've seen them play in the last 3 years. You see, offensively, I feel really confident that Michigan is going to be able to have success moving the football on Washington defensively, because Texas did. But why I'm a little bit concerned about Washington's defense more in this game than I was against Texas is because Texas is a pass-happy team and Quinn Ewers isn't that great of a QB. You see, Michigan does what Washington struggled to do last game, and that was stopping the run. You see, it was idiotic to me how Steve Sarkisian just kept on calling passing plays when one of his running backs was averaging at 9.4 yards per attempt. We know in Michigan, if there's any team that's going to run the football, it's going to be these boys. Let's not forget, they beat Penn State, ending that game running the football 31 straight times. And if there was ever a game to run that football 31 straight times again, is against a Washington front that doesn't look all that fit to be able to stop a team that has this kind of approach when it comes to running the football. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, they're the best 1-2 punch in all of college football. Blake Corum is the tough, grinding out, just get a few 5-6 yard carries here and there. And Donovan Edwards is the big home run threat. He's the guy that is the threat to take it to the crib anytime he touches the football. Blake Corum doesn't have that same level of explosiveness that Donovan Edwards has. Now, what Michigan did to Bama, which was a different wrinkle that I haven't seen them execute this season, is that they had another running back that they got implemented into the offense. And there was times when they had 2-3 running backs on the field and you didn't know who was going to get the ball. Washington has to go all out on making sure they can get this rushing attack of Michigan neutralized. And it's really hard to stop this Michigan offense because this is probably the most balanced offense in all of college football. They can beat you on the ground and they can beat you through the air. J.J. McCarthy had a pretty nice game. A lot of people would say otherwise, but I thought he played pretty well. He was extending plays. He made some big throws under pressure. And when you're able to make big throws against Alabama's defense with how good their secondary is and how good their pass rush is, you feel confident about your ability to do that against Washington. Now, Washington has a guy on defense that I think is going to cause a lot of problems for Michigan's offense, and that's Braylon Trice. Now, we know that they're without one of the best offensive linemen in college football, Zach Minter. He's an All-American. And Braylon Trice, he's probably a guy who is going to give Michigan's O-line a lot of fits in this game. Now, you did a really good job against Dallas Turner and the pass rushers that Alabama has, but Braylon Trice, he's just as good as what Dallas Turner is, in my opinion. Well, maybe not as good, but he's still a guy who I would take in the first round. And Washington's secondary, they're not great, but they're not necessarily bad neither. They're in between. So Michigan offensively, when you look at how they match up against Washington defensively, if they can find a way to slow down Braylon Trice, then that's pretty much the only guy on this defense that really is capable of having game-changing ability to really just take this game over. If you don't allow Braylon Trice to take this game over for Washington defensively, you should be able to move the football with a good amount of success. Now, I don't think that Washington's defense is just going to allow Michigan to move the ball up and down the field every single drive. They're going to get a couple of stops here or there. You want to know why? Because they are a well-coached defense. And not only are they a well-coached defense, but they are an overall well-coached team. Jim Harbaugh is a great head coach. This dude has won at the highest of levels everywhere that he's been. He's in the national championship now. He went to the Super Bowl. He won 3 straight NFC championships, or he went to 3 straight NFC championships. But Kalen DeBoer, this dude is a prodigy at head coach. He is the best kept secret in college football. A lot of people from a national standpoint don't know how much of a stud this dude is. He was winning 3 national titles coaching NAIA, making under a 7-figure salary. So this dude is going to have this team ready, and they're going to be well coached and well prepared for this game. And like I said, offensively, Washington is a tough team to beat. They got 3 NFL caliber wide receivers. There aren't a lot of teams that are 3 deep at cornerback. Thankfully, Michigan happens to be. So these cornerbacks against these Washington wide receivers are going to be the biggest, most intriguing matchup of this game. And we got 2 really solid quarterbacks. Well, you got J.J. McCarthy, who's pretty solid. You got Michael Penix, who was looking like a damn prodigy last week against Texas. And you see, if you're going to be able to beat Michigan, you need outstanding quarterback play. You see, there's a popular sentiment going around that if C.J. Stroud played for Ohio State this year, Ohio State would have beaten Michigan. Now, of course, that's just a scenario. That's just, hypothesis that people like to run with. But if that is true, then Michigan could be in a little bit of trouble. Because Michael Penix, this dude can do it all. He's efficient. He's accurate. He makes great decisions with the football. He's great at reading coverages. So Michigan is going to have to throw a lot at this dude to get this dude off rhythm. But the good thing about Michigan's defense is that they have the capability of getting Michael Penix off balance. I've watched nearly every single Washington Huskies game this year, and I don't even live on the West Coast. I know more about Washington than the majority of people who are talking about this game on a national level. Michael Penix is a great quarterback, but there's been several games I've watched this season when he started out a little bit slow. You see, the key to Washington being able to beat Texas last week was that Michael Penix had to get off to a fast start. And in a game like this, Michigan, they got to get Michael Penix a little bit rattled out the gate. And how can you do that? Getting pressure on him and find a way to slow down these wide receivers. You're not going to be able to shut down these wide receivers. You can only hope to contain them, which you're going to have the ability to do because of how great your secondary is and your ability to generate pressure with your front seven. And if your pass rush can get home, then it gives the guys that are in coverage against these guys less times that they have to stay in coverage with these wide receivers. But on the same time, it works the same way if the roles are reversed. Let's say that this secondary does do a great job at slowing down these wide receivers just a tad bit when they can get the rhythm and timing off. Then that just allows his pass rush just a little bit more time to get after Michael Penix. Like, we know that Washington has a great offensive line, but they're not going to be able to guard this dude for 10, 20 seconds every single play. Like, there's going to be moments when Michigan is going to get home. And you see Texas, they tried to get after Michael Penix. They tried to send some exotic looks at him. They tried to send some studs and some blitzes at him, and they did a great job picking him up. Michigan, they were killing Alabama every single time they sent pressure. But one thing that Alabama didn't have that Washington does have is a center that knows how to snap the fucking football. Alabama's center didn't know anything about giving Jalen Milroe a good snap. I don't even know how they even made it that far, having that bad of a center snapping the football for him. But whatever, this is about Washington, Michigan, and national championship. This is a really good offensive line, and this is a really good defensive line. We're really about to see who's about to win this battle up front. And the thing about Washington is that they're a pass-heavy team. You know what they're going to do the majority of the time. Now, if Dylan Johnson comes back, they're going to put more emphasis on trying to be a little bit more balanced. But even when he was in the game, like, he was only averaging 2.3 yards per attempt. And that's not really the identity of Washington's offense. Their identity is they want to push the football downfield, and they want to destroy you with these NFL wide receivers they have who are all big bodies. They're all like 180 plus. They're over 6 feet tall. They're long, rangy, and really hard to stay in phase with. You got to limit the big plays if you're Michigan, and your defense does a great job at that. And I'm really fascinated to see how Michigan's defense is going to game plan for this offense, because they haven't seen an offense like this since when they last went up against C.J. Stroud in Ohio State back in 2022. So you might have to have a similar game plan that you had in that game when C.J. Stroud was playing for Ohio State the previous year and bring that game plan into this one. Now, Washington, you are going to have to be able to not allow Michigan to bully ball you. You can't allow these boys to push you around, which shouldn't happen when it comes to your offensive line versus their defensive line. At most, I think Washington is probably going to give up maybe 2-3 sacks at most. Okay, I don't expect for Michigan's front seven to just be pushing around Washington and pushing their weight around like how they did against Alabama. Your offensive line is way better coached and just more talented. Now, on the other end, I don't know about how Washington's defensive line is going to hold up. So the best thing that you can do is try to put Michigan in situations where you can win on the early downs and put them in third and long situations. And sometimes with Michigan, I think that they get away from what they do the best at times, which is running the football. Against Alabama, there were moments early in that game when they came out throwing the football, and it damn near costed them an interception. I was like, bro, what the hell are you doing coming out throwing the football if y'all don't run the ball? So Michigan last week against Bama, they did a really good job at belittling Alabama's defense. They did a lot of unique things offensively from a schematic standpoint that confused Alabama's defense to the point when Nick Saban had those boards on the sideline, he was like, hey, like, you got to account for the motion. You got to communicate. Washington defensively, they got to make sure that the offense that Michigan is going to be running out there doesn't confuse them and everybody's in the right positions. You don't want to give Michigan any plays due to blown coverages or missed assignments because they're really good at that. If they can make Alabama have missed assignments with Nick Saban being a defensive-minded coach, you could run into the same problem. All right? Now, who's the more talented team? I don't think that matters because stylistically, this is what makes this game so interesting. It's not about talent. All right, both of these two teams are 14-0, and nobody expected neither one of these two teams will really be in this position. Like at the start of the year, there were a good amount of people saying Michigan was going to win the national championship. But last week, the majority of bettors had their money on Alabama. Both of these two teams have overcome tons of adversity. All right, Washington has been in a bunch of one-possession games, and they're really good at being able to win these one-possession games. Michigan has had to overcome these off-the-field distractions with the whole cheating scandal thing, and they've took what could have been a distraction and what could have derailed their perfect season and their national title aspirations, and instead of that being a distraction to them, they've used that as motivation, and they've rallied behind it. You see, when you're going up against Michigan, not only are you getting ready to play a 60-minute football game, but you're about to go to absolute war. These guys are tough. They're gritty. They're nasty. Listen, I had a hard time picking who I thought was going to win this game. I really did. And I picked against Michigan all season long, and I'm going to continue to pick against them again. I'm going with Washington, people. I'm going with the Huskies. I'm going with the underdogs, people. I've been rocking with Washington all the way since the season first began. I picked them to win the Pac-12. I picked them to make it to the college football playoffs. And I had them damn near making it to the national championship. Like this offense with these three elite wide receivers that they have and Michael Penix at QB, they're like a diet version of what LSU was back in 2019. I'm not saying they are exactly like 2019 LSU. All I'm saying is that they are a diet version of what that team was. You know, they don't have like 3 first-round or 3 top 10 wide receivers like how they did Terrence Marshall, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, but they do have 3 wide receivers, one with Dunze being the best one who probably could be a top 5, top 10 pick. Jalen Pogue, McMillan, all those other guys probably could be like late first rounders, early second round guys. But then you got Michael Penix slinging that football. I feel like Michigan's defense is not going to be able to get enough key stops when it matters the most against Michael Penix in his passing attack. Like, I get that they got a really good pass rush, but they haven't seen an offensive line this stout of what Washington has. All right, Washington at best probably is going to give up maybe 2-3 sacks at the most in this game. I'm rolling with Washington because I trust Michael Penix in this game. I trust Kellen DeBoer. This dude is the best kept secret in all of college football. And when Washington wins the national championship, everybody is going to know just how good of a coach this dude actually is. And this is a precursor because both of these two teams are going to be in the Big Ten next year. And you potentially could see Washington once again, if you're Michigan, in the Big Ten championship. This dude is an outstanding football coach. All right, he doesn't have any more than 11 losses in his career, not just in Division I college football, but just in his coaching career in general. This dude is winning national championships, coaching NAIA, making less than a 7-figure salary. So I know I've doubted Michigan all season long, and I've been rocking with Washington all season long, and that isn't really changing. So if you want to call me a Michigan hater, go ahead. I mean, you can call me a hater all you want to, but I'm not really picking against you this time because I just want you to lose. I'm really picking against you this time because I truthfully believe that Washington is going to be able to win this game. You may be the more talented team on paper, but styles make fights. And the style of Washington's offense and their wide receivers and Michael Penix at QB, it's just something that not too many teams have been able to find a way to have a formula to stop. And I think that Washington gets that 15th win. They go undefeated and they win their national championship for the first time under Kalen DeBoer. Now, I say first time winning a national championship under Kalen DeBoer. I don't know if they've won championships in the past, but I don't know. But all I know is that the Huskies are going to get it done, people. I'm taking the Huskies. 31-28 is my final score prediction in this game. I think we're going to be in for an all-time classic. Michael Penix engineers a game-winning drive that sets up the game-winning field goal by Washington's kicker, and they win the Natty. When the Carolina Panthers traded for Bryce Young last year, the hope was that he was going to be their answer at quarterback. And so far up to this point in his career, he has looked like the complete opposite. He's looked like a bust. And now everybody's looking back at that trade and they're saying that it's one of the worst draft day trades of all time to trade up for a quarterback. But you got to ask yourself, what went wrong in that trade for Bryce Young? What did Carolina miss Or what did they not do that made this trade look like a whiff? Well, I'll tell you this. Anytime you're going to draft a quarterback with the number 1 pick and you're giving up so many assets to draft a guy like Bryce Young, number 1 overall, wouldn't it make more sense to prioritize the offensive side of the football? And instead of prioritizing, giving Bryce Young playmakers, they decided to trade away what potentially could have been his go-to wide receiver this year. Not even potentially. It would have been his go-to wide receiver this year, and that would have been DJ Moore. They gave him to Chicago. They should have never traded away DJ Moore. That made no sense to me. If you're going to invest this much capital into a young QB, you got to keep a guy like DJ Moore around. And he would have been a perfect fit for Bryce Young because you don't have to give him the ball just strictly by throwing it downfield to him. You can give him the ball by bubble screens, slants. DJ Moore, you just got to put the ball in his hands and allow him to make things happen. That's the kind of receiver that a guy like Bryce Young needs. Somebody who can just get open and just is an all-around playmaker. You see, if you were going to invest in a young quarterback and give up all this many assets to get him, it would have made sense to also put that same amount of priority on making sure that this dude was going to be walking into an offense that you at least had a couple of playmakers around him. Adam Thielen and DJ Moore would have been a really solid 1-2 punch at wide receiver for Bryce Young to throw the football to. But instead, you trade him away when the guy who you should have traded away to Chicago, who I'm pretty sure Chicago would have took, would have been Brian Burns. And the Rams reportedly were going to give you 2 first-rounders for Brian Burns, but instead, you decided to keep him. And that never made any sense to me. Like, I get it that pass rusher is one of the most important positions in the National Football League. It's a reason why these pass rushers get paid so much money. But Brian Burns is a really good pass rusher, but he's not an elite pass rusher. He's not a Nick Bosa, a Michael Parsons, or a TJ Watt. He's a B+ pass rusher, which should have made him expendable for trade. And if you were going to trade up for a guy like Bryce Young, it would have made more sense to keep your best player on offense, that being DJ Moore, and getting rid of your best player in defense and Brian Burns, and going that direction. Because if you're prioritizing developing a young quarterback, then making sure that he has a go-to wide receiver should have been prioritized. You should have never traded away DJ Moore. Brian Burns should have been the dude who got traded to Chicago in that package to get Bryce Young. Yes, nobody wanted to see Brian Burns go, but it just made more sense. You're going to draft a young quarterback and get rid of the best receiver that he could have been throwing to? That makes no sense. How is Brian Burns going to make Bryce Young any better? He's not. You can always get another good pass rusher. You may not be able to find a B+ pass rusher like Brian Burns, but there's plenty of solid pass rushers that you could have signed in free agency. You see, like, if Brian Burns would have got traded to Chicago, they would have took that. You could make the excuse and say, well, JT, like, they wanted DJ Moore. They needed a pass rusher also. There's a reason why they traded for Montez Sweat and they extended him immediately, because pass rusher was a big need for them, just as big as a wide receiver was. But they would have took Brian Burns too, because he would have also been a really good trade target for them, because they needed the pass rusher. So you couldn't have went wrong with trading any of those two players, and DJ Moore or Brian Burns. They would have took either one. It's just that you gave them the wrong one. You should have gave them Brian Burns. If they would have called you and be like, hey, bro, like, we want DJ Moore in any trade, be like, we're not trying to give up DJ Moore, but we'll give you Brian Burns. You mean to tell me they wouldn't have took that? Brian Burns is a really good pass rusher. If you are going to draft a young quarterback, you should have made sure that you gave him a true number 1 wide receiver to throw the football to. That's the biggest mistake that the Carolina Panthers made. And it's a really big one that I'm pretty sure if they had the chance to go back and redo, they would definitely trade Brian Burns instead of DJ Moore. DJ Moore has been an all-pro receiver this year. He's damn near been a top 3, top 5 wide receiver. And when him and Adam Thielen on the same team, that offense would have looked way more better than what it did. Like, I felt so bad for Bryce Young watching him against the Jacksonville Jaguars with his little hands smash the tablet down. It didn't even look like the tablet even broke. He probably smashed that tablet down with 3 out of 10 force. What they did to Bryce Young was an absolute travesty. This dude is a great quarterback. All right, well, he looked like a great quarterback prospect. I can't say he's a great quarterback because he hasn't looked like that this year. He's looked awful, but when he was coming out of Alabama, He was a generational prospect, and I will live and die on that statement. He carried Alabama on his back. Even Nick Saban said it. He said that we were too Bryce Young dependent. That's why Nick Saban made all those sweeping changes on his coaching staff. And that's why they changed the philosophy. They went from Bryce Young to now being a complementary style football team. Bryce Young, if he was on any other team, like the Houston Texans or anybody else that prioritized the offensive side of the football, he would have had a way better rookie season. Carolina didn't prioritize the offense, which was stupid. Because if you're going to trade up this much assets to get a guy like this, why wouldn't you have kept your best receiver? It would have just made more sense to give Chicago Brian Burns. Well, JT, you don't know if Chicago would have took Brian Burns, bro. They traded for Montez Sweat. If you would have offered Brian Burns to sweeten that deal instead of DJ Moore, they would have took that too because they needed a pass rusher too. And Brian Burns would have definitely improved that defense early in the season and never would have had to make the trade for Montez Sweat. They could have just gave up a second-round pick for maybe T. Higgins, who was about to be a free agent, or Jerry Jeudy. They would have figured out the wide receiver position. They probably could have just drafted one with the pick that you would have given them. Hell, they could have drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., number one with that pick. But you see, with you opting to not prioritize offense and getting rid of your best player on offense that Bryce Young could have been throwing the football to, you put Bryce Young at a major disadvantage. There's nothing a guy like this can do behind a terrible offensive line and wide receivers that can't separate. And Adam Thielen being your best wide receiver at 80 years old is really problematic. On a championship caliber football team, Adam Thielen probably is a wide receiver 2 at best. All right, now Kansas City definitely could use Adam Thielen. Nobody's denying that. But I mean, Carolina really messed up giving up DJ Moore. Like, they should have traded Brian Burns. That would have just made so much sense. You should have just prioritized building up that offense. Why would it make sense to take away from the offense? Like, why would you trade away your franchise cornerstone on that side of the football if you knew you were taking Bryce Young number 1 overall? So that's what I think was the biggest mistake the Carolina Panthers made when they traded for Bryce Young. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Let me know down in the comment section down below before you guys leave, like, how y'all felt about this podcast. Because sometimes when I be recording these things, I kind of be thinking to myself, like, bro, am I saying the wrong thing? Like, am I tripping? Like, do I sound drunk? Do I sound high? Like, just let a brother know, like, how my communication comes across, because sometimes I be thinking I be tripping sometimes. Like, I still be insanely confident, but sometimes I be like mispronouncing words and things like that, and it can get a little tough. So before y'all head out of here, like, just leave a rate 1 through 5 how y'all felt about tonight's live stream. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you're new. We got a lot of great content coming on the channel for 2024. We got the Senior Bowl around the corner. We're going to be giving out a lot of draft coverage this year. I love talking about the draft every single time it comes around. So make sure that you guys stay tuned in for that. Turn on post notifications. And we're going to have more national championship content coming up. If you just joined and you missed the majority of this live stream, remember that you can always play it back once it ends, or you can check it out in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. We always have the podcast out no later than 8 a.m. in the morning. So when you wake up tomorrow, it'll be in your podcast feed. Go ahead, give us a 5-star review, and let me know what you guys think about this episode down in the comment section down below. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast.